We go. I am now recording. Be on your best behavior. Hi all. Welcome to our meeting on the 17th of February, 2021. I've lost track. Is it our fifth, sixth meeting of 2020? I've lost track at this point. Roland Weimer is going to speak to us tonight. He's going to talk to us about Shelter Box and about his trip on the Camino de Santiago. I am going to start us off with ringing the bell. I actually will remember to do so eventually. Ding, dong.
Gong.
Nope, no. All right, and at the suggestion of Chris Jones, I am actually going to play a quick video. It's about 5 minutes long, Roland, if that's okay with you. Can I give you enough time? And it's a tour of RI headquarters in Chicago. I thought we would share that. This one.
Hello, my name is John Hugo, the General Secretary of Rotary International and the Rotary Foundation. I'd like to welcome you to beautiful Evanston, Illinois, the home of Rotary International headquarters. Over the past few months, we've taken every precaution to help prevent the spread of COVID-19 within our community. Unfortunately, this means we haven't been able to welcome visitors into one Rotary Center. But now, for the first time, we're excited to offer a virtual tour. I hope you'll enjoy this video, including a sneak peek of our new exhibit space on the 18th floor. Rotary International headquarters has been at One Rotary Center in Evanston since 1987. Rotary owns the 18-story building and currently occupies about 40% of the space. Today, we'll visit the first, 17th, and 18th floors. Come on in. We're starting in room 711, a recreation of the site of the first Rotary Club meeting. Rotary founder Paul Harris moved to Chicago to pursue his law career in 1896. After a few years, he wanted a way to create meaningful connections among businessmen. In 1905, he and 3 other men held what became known as the first Rotary Club meeting in the downtown Chicago office of Gus Lohr. Local Rotarians recreated the office in the 1980s and formed the Paul Harris Room 711 Club to preserve and share Rotary history. The office was later rebuilt at One Rotary Center. The fiberglass statue of Paul Harris was created by Rotarian Kimihiko Morioka of Tokyo, Japan. Morioka traveled to Evanston to assemble the statue at One Rotary Center in 1993, and Paul has been here smiling and shaking hands with Rotarians ever since. And nearby are images representing Harris's vision for Rotary and members putting it into action today. Welcome to the 17th floor and the Arch Clone Society Gallery. At the 1917 convention, Rotary President Arch Clone defined several areas he considered essential for Rotary's future, growth, and success. His suggestion led to a Rotary Endowment Fund, which became the Rotary Foundation. It seems eminently proper that we should accept endowments for the purpose of doing good in the world, in charitable, educational, or other avenues of community progress. Now, we use his name to recognize donors who have contributed $250,000 or more to the Rotary Foundation. And today, there are more than 1,100 members of the Arch Clone Society, many of whom have portraits displayed here in the gallery. The 18th floor houses the offices of senior leaders, the boardroom, and interactive exhibits highlighting Rotary's impact around the world. More than 200 flags at the entryway reflect Rotary's global presence. Rotary International directors, foundation trustees, and various committees meet here in the boardroom. And being an international organization, we facilitate effective communication by providing simultaneous interpretation from booths that overlook the boardroom. Next to the boardroom is the office of the Rotary International President, who is elected to serve a 1-year term. The President spends approximately 25% of their term in Evanston, where visitors will find them hard at work, silhouetted against the Chicago skyline. The rest of the year is spent traveling around the world as an ambassador for Rotary. Our final spot is a newly renovated exhibit space that introduces Rotary leaders, shares stories of impact, and highlights our vision statement. Together, we see a world where people unite to take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves. A wall of movable panels offers visitors a chance to explore milestones and stories of impact, such as the creation of Rotaract in 1968 and the Peace Centers in 1999. You can also find inspiration in Rotary's action plan, increasing our impact, expanding our reach, enhancing participant engagement, and increasing our ability to adapt. We hope you've enjoyed this virtual tour. On behalf of the entire Rotary staff, we've missed having you here, and we can't wait to see you here again soon. Visit rotary.org/tours for updates. Until then, stay safe and stay well.
Thank you for that recommendation, Mr. Jones. I appreciate that. So with that, I will quickly ask if anybody has any happy bucks they'd like to share.
I got my second COVID shot today, so I'm happy.
All right. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. And
Yay.
go ahead. All right, I'm all for not getting the Rona. All
We
right.
don't even have vaccines up here.
Yeah, we haven't seen much down here either.
So Jeff got called out to change a tire on a friend, service above self, I guess. He's out in the dark changing a tire for a buddy.
Roadside service above self. Thanks.
Roadside service, yes, above self.
All righty. Well, if there is nothing else pressing, I will turn the mic and the screen over to Roland Weimer, who's going to talk to us tonight about Shelter Box and go into awesome detail about his trip on the Camino de Santiago.
Thank you. And let me share my screen. So I'm the Shelter Box ambassador for our district here at my home Rotary Club of the Palisades. Shelter Box is a international disaster relief organization that was originally created as a centennial project by a Rotary Club in the United Kingdom, and now has branched out all over the world. Shelter Box is its own independent charity. So Shelter Box USA is what I am volunteering for, but it is a partner organization with Rotary and has been from the very beginning. This picture was taken after a tsunami following a devastating earthquake in Southeast Asia, when the United Nations chartered a Antonov 124 cargo airplane, that's the largest cargo plane in the world, and filled it with shelter boxes. And that put the charity on the map. And if you look carefully, on every shelter box, you will see the Rotary wheel as local partnering with Rotarians on the ground is one of the essential elements of delivering shelter to people that have lost everything in a natural or man-made disaster. And it has to get, after it is landed in country, to the sites where it's needed. Sometimes it takes carrying it, sometimes it's lifted in by helicopters. Sometimes we're only delivering the tents rather than a complete shelter box. And there are some tent cities around the world that have been in existence for many, many years. Current deployments include the Lake Niger region in Africa, continuous support of the refugee crisis in Iraq and Syria, as well as the Rohingya fleeing from Myanmar to Bangladesh. And what we do is we deliver essential needs for people that have lost everything in a disaster. I'll skip over this and just go back to the iconic shelter box tent. There are different designs for different regions of the world, depending on what the needs are. And there are 5 pre-positioning warehouses throughout the world where essential supplies are warehoused so they can be put together and be delivered on the ground where it's needed very, very quickly, because you cannot go and start raising funds and then buy supplies and then figure out the logistics after a disaster strikes. You have to be able to respond very quickly. There is a shelter box that contains a family tent, ground covering, essential tools for starting repairs of your own shelter, cooking supplies, water filtration system, and LED lighting for people who need that. But we found that sometimes what is more needed is a essential shelter toolkit so people can repair their own tools, and the effectiveness of your response to a disaster depends on what the needs are on the ground. And sometimes a shelter repair kit is more important and only costs 1/10 of what a complete shelter box would cost to deliver. We also deliver school boxes, which is basically a classroom in a box. Over here you may see a can of chalkboard paint. So any flat surface you can paint with the chalkboard paint, and otherwise you have the complete supplies for an entire classroom in a school box. Because when you build tent cities for hundreds and thousands of refugees, 1/3 to half of the inhabitants are children, and they have been displaced. And one of the essential needs that they have while their parents are trying to put their lives back together is continued schooling. So this is a brief rundown of what Shelterbox does. And Shelterbox depends on the support, financial support, and support on the ground from Rotary clubs throughout the world to fulfill its mission. So that's one of the things that I do as part of my Rotary service. But a couple of years ago, I felt the need to do something entirely different. And that brings us to the other part of my talk tonight, and that is my Camino de Santiago. In 2018, I walked 556 miles in 29 days on foot across the north of Spain. Now, there are many Caminos. These are old medieval pilgrimage routes throughout Europe, and they all end in Santiago de Compostela. And I walked the most popular one, the classical Camino, which is from a town called Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in southern France at the foot of the Pyrenees, all the way to Santiago, and then on to what was considered the end of the world in the medieval times, Finisterre, a distance roughly from New York City to Columbus, Ohio. Why? everyone who does it needs to answer that question for themselves. But there are different ways of doing it. You can do it for different reasons, religious, spiritual, cultural, as a form of exercise, or for tourism, plus an unofficial reason. Reportedly, every year, there are a number of pilgrims who do it for penal reasons. There are judges in Europe who will convict you to either go complete the Camino or go to jail. So if they do at least the last 100 kilometers on foot or on horseback or with a mule, or the last 200 kilometers on a bike, and you document this through stamps in your pilgrim passport, at the very end, you can get a Compostela, the official certificate that you have completed it. And there are two different types. If you completed it, at least in part for religious reasons, you can receive a religious Compostela from the official Camino Pilgrims office. And if you do it during a holy year, then you receive a indulgence, which is a forgiveness of your worldly sins. But this now is not the most common reason why people do it, but it is the reason why this Camino has existed for more than 1,000 years. It became really popular in the in medieval times because of a book that was written, the Book of St. James, and it had all the ingredients of making it really interesting for everybody. It had liturgies, it had the retelling of miracles, how the remains of St. James were found in far-off Galicia. It had the battles of Charlemagne and Roland, which was one of the motivators for me to go. My namesake had some adventures on the Camino, and it provided a travel guide for medieval pilgrims. Me being German, I first bought a couple of books and read up on the Camino and all the things that you need, the equipment you need, how you need to prepare for it. There's also a very good movie about it. It's called The Way by Emilio Estevez, starring his father, and he has a cameo, about a dentist from Seattle who goes to collect the remains of his son and decides to finish his Camino. What I did was I created a spreadsheet and planned out the entire Camino day by day. And if you look carefully, it was originally planned to happen in May. I ended up doing it in July and August of 2018. It usually takes 34 days to go from Saint-Jean to Santiago. I went all the way to Finisterre in 29 days. It's a hike. And if you look at the profile of the first day's hike, you see that the first day will already separate those who think this is an easy walk from those who know what they are in for. This is about 1,600 meters of elevation change in the first day. So that's 1 mile up and down in the first day. And then you end up in a former monastery as an albergue, and you have another 790 kilometers to go to the end of your Camino. So to understand what the Camino means, you have to meet the Camino family. I don't expect you to remember any of these names, but for anybody who's done it, it is one of the experiences. I liken the Camino to a wave on which you swim along with people that happen to be in the same place at the same time with you. And you find people that you can get along with. You don't necessarily walk together, but every day at the end of the day, you run into the same people because they walk more or less the same way. So I'll read some passages from a little journal that I kept during the Camino, and this one is about day 2. Long stretch, but nobody knows better, and Marco is setting the pace. He has to do more than 30 kilometers a day, every day. Didn't intend to stay at this albergue until I read that the famous church next to it is San Esteban, St. Stephen's, like my hometown church I was baptized in. Nice place, small group. Marco de Torino, Martin the Beard, Leanne Pennsyltucky, and Tolly Holland. The Blessed Sisters of the Sacred Heart give out the stands. That way, everybody has to go to the church. So after dinner, there was a meditative prayer service. Nice. Communal breakfast, and off we go. It is we. We didn't make it to Puente la Reina. It was a hard last few miles. It hurt. The heat is beating down on you and sucks you dry from the ground. The body is not used to it. So here are some members of the people that I was swimming along on the Camino, and I gave everybody nicknames so I could remember their names. So the guy with the big beard, who happens to work for a beard grooming company in Zurich, is Martin the Beard. We will meet them again along the way. So how does a pilgrim's day look like? It starts at 5:30 in the morning. And actually, the first couple of days, you learn that waking up early in the morning is better for your day than staying until 7 and leaving then. You do about 12 to 28 miles, or at least that's what we did. And you expend and consume about 5,000 to 7,000 calories every single day, and pass between 10 and 100 churches. You don't visit all of them, but you've passed through about 1,000 years of history every single day. You also meet a lot of people. Very few of them are Spaniards because it's too hot during the day, or they are at their work and you are walking with other pilgrims on the Camino. At 5:30, you wake up, you wash up, you get dressed, you pack, all in the dark because you don't want to wake up the others that are still trying to sleep. And at 6 o'clock, you go without breakfast. And you learn very quickly that the sun always rises in your back because you're always walking westward. Then around 9 o'clock, after 9 miles or so, you have breakfast. And food becomes very, very important when you spend this many calories every day. The most important thing that I've learned on the Camino, whenever you take a break, take your boots and your socks off. Best thing you can do for your feet, and your feet are your friends. You need them every day. And then you go on again. How that sounds and feels, this video that Marco shot gives a little idea. a little side note. I had 3 different ways of walking the Camino. For the first third or so, I walked by myself. At the end of the day, you would meet the same people over, but during the day, I would walk by myself. The second half of the Camino to Santiago, I walked with a young fellow I had met numerous times. And one morning we just headed out together, and for the rest, all the way to Santiago, we stuck together. And then from Santiago to Finisterre, I walked again by myself, and it's 3 totally different experiences. So every 2 hours or so, you take a break, you get something to eat, and you walk again for another 4, 5, 6, 7 miles. However far your feet will take you that day. And your feet and your body get very good at telling you when enough is enough for a day. Once you get where you decide to stay overnight, you have to find an albergue, a place to stay. You claim your bed, you take a shower, you wash your clothes, you take a siesta. In the evening, you have a pilgrim's meal because you eat much earlier than the local people eat. You prepare your stuff for the next day, and at 2200 hours, it's light out. And you repeat the next day. So where do you stay? Well, there are albergues, hostels along the way. Some have existed for hundreds of years. Some are brand new. Some are run by local communities, by local governments, by local parishes. Some are run by individuals, or they are rural hotels. Many are staffed by hospitaleros. These are volunteers who work in the hostels, and many of them are former pilgrims themselves. To give you a little idea, here are 3 examples of albergues. So the albergues sleep between 4 and 40 people to a room. There are 12 to 600 people in the different albergues, except for one at the very end, which we'll see. And the cost to stay overnight is between 0 and 15 euros, which is about 15 euros, about $18. You get a bed, you get sheets, you get a shower, facilities to wash your clothes, and sometimes you get breakfast. But most pilgrims, especially the ones that I was walking with, we would always leave before breakfast, just to get a head start on our day. So here are 3 of the albergues. This particular albergue we actually didn't want to go to. We wanted to go to another albergue that all of the tour guides said this is the place to stay, only that when we walked into town, there was a big sign that said the albergue had closed. So I'm pulling out my phone, I'm on WhatsApp, I'm texting to the other people in the family, and I say, where are you guys staying? And they say, just go along the route, you'll come around a bend and there is an arch. Walk through it. And you'll find us in the pool. So I said, be right there. So this is a very nice rural hostel. It cost 10 euros, and we ended up spending the siesta in the pool and drinking beer by the pool. This albergue is the opposite. It's in a church that was built in the 12th century. It was free. You could decide whether you wanted to donate anything, but you sleep on exercise mats. 20 people to a room, or if you can count the number of booths, you know exactly how many pilgrims stayed there overnight. We cooked together, we ate together, we had another meditative prayer service in the evening. And then we found the Casa del Camino. Now this one is interesting because we had a choice to make, whether we're going to go left along a new route or go to the right along the traditional, actually Roman trading route. So me being a traditionalist, I said, let's go the traditional route, which one of the German tour guides refers to is only for idiots and masochists, because it's an entire day along the national route 120. So you have traffic going by you and no shade. So 8 hours of walking, no shade. But we did it anyway, and we were rewarded by this albergue. Foot baths, a pool, cabanas, and a hammock. So I took a picture of me lying in the hammock with the beer, and I sent it to the rest of the family. And wouldn't you know it, the next day, Martin the Beard, got the same beer from the same fridge. And the day after that, Lee and Pennsylvania also end up in the same albergue, because we're all part of the same family. But the Camino holds other meaning than just meeting with people. So one of those spots is the Cruz de Ferro. Left late, 1 hour more sleep, breakfast, a glorious morning, cold, 4 layers of clothes, steep ascent to the Cruz de Ferro, but the steps felt light. The cross holds meaning. You can feel the worries that have been left here. Deposited my stone, which I had dug from the bed of the Fechenbach, the creek that gave the name to my hometown, and the dust that had fallen off it on the way. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I knelt and prayed for all the others in my life. And then we went on, and it felt better than I had felt in years. The steps were light and without burden. We find a nice modern albergue for 12 euros and stayed. The Templar Castle is massive. We had 3 jugs of sangria and a nice dinner over 4 hours. A good day. So this is what we did for an entire month. And towards the end, you can see on the mile marker here, it's kilometer 104.563, which I had to take a picture of because it's 100 kilometers and my date of birth. So towards the end, things got a little tougher. Day 24, 21 miles, toughest day yet, no power left. Every step says stop. Just got up as usual without breakfast, and after the first ascent, the tank was empty. Got better after breakfast, and by the time we got to Porto Marin, we ran up the stairs to the new old town. We took a leisurely lunch and paid for it on the remaining 8 miles. just a slog. Day 26, Puente to Monte de Gozo, 28 miles. Today did not go as planned. We had planned an easy 17 miles to Opretronso, started out well with overcast skies and good spirits. Feet and legs started to hurt. More ups and downs didn't help. By the time we made it to Opretronso, I was done with leg cramps and shin splints. The Camino resembled a mass walk all day. Hordes of pilgrims, all lightly weighted day-pack short-term walkers. Turns out there is a double holiday in Spain, ideal to do the 100 kilometers in 5 days for Compostela. All albergues were full, all bed and breakfasts too, all hostels and all hotels. So we decided to make for Santiago. 3 miles from Santiago, we ran out of time, steam, and hope to find a place in Santiago, and made for the massive Junta albergue at Monte de Gozo, which accommodates between 400 and 3,000. Santiago tomorrow. A mix of excitement and exhaustions, both mental and physical, and Daniel's abundance of energy carried us to Santiago. The arrival was anticlimactic. Even at 8:30 in the morning, there was a line to go into the cathedral and no backpacks allowed. I will not wait for 2 hours to pray in a church. Here is a little sound, I hope you can hear it, that gives you a contrast from what it is like walking in the Camino and getting to Santiago.
Roland,
can you hear?
if you pause for a second, stop sharing, and then when you share again, there's a checkbox at the bottom of the share.
Okay, let me.
It says, yeah, it says share computer audio, I think.
Okay, yeah, it is actually, I know what it is. Forgive me, I need to change my speakers. That I believe is what it is. So let's see whether this works now. Let's go. Doesn't sound like it. Let me see. Unfortunately, you can't hear this. You can't hear the sound. This is the first view you get of the cathedral, but by the time you get close to the cathedral, it is such a cacophony of sounds. The bagpipe player didn't help, but it's such a cacophony of sound. You just spent a month walking relatively quietly, and this was just overwhelming. So I decided not to stay. We got our Compostelas instead, said goodbye, and I left for Finisterre. What a difference. The way is quiet, they are pilgrims, but there is space and the mind can open again. I need to get my rhythm back. The next 2 days are for me. This part is personal. It feels different from Santiago on. We shall see. Day 28, Finisterre is pulling me. It has a strong hold and holds meaning, more than the rest of the Camino. Day 29, elation, light steps, light heart, the end is in sight, and then above the first sight of the sea. What a sight, and everything falls off your body and soul. For me, this part of the way holds so much more meaning. I have arrived at the end of the world. From Thé via Corbuson to Langostera and Finisterre is a celebration. The way goes on, but I do not care. I have made it. There is more to do at the end, but I have arrived to do it. Tonight, sunset at the Faro de Finestre, the lighthouse at the end of the world. And tomorrow, sunrise, God willing. So that is the end of my Camino. It's a utterly unique experience to slow down and for an entire month do everything at a pedestrian pace. Life gets very, very simple when all that you do is get up, walk, eat, sleep, and repeat for an entire month. You get to meet a fascinating group of people. I'm still in touch with members of my Camino family, thanks to modern communication. And our group was utterly cosmopolitan and international. Italians, French, Dutch, Portuguese, Lithuanians, Americans, Canadians, Brazilians. We all found together, and the only thing we had in common was that we had decided to do something that people have been doing for more than 1,000 years. And that is walk this particular stretch of earth from the foot of the Pyrenees to Santiago and the end of the world. And in the end, you find that the Santiago, the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage is a metaphor for life. You don't know when it ends. You don't know who you'll meet along the way. Some people will follow along. You get to forks in the road and you have to make a decision, because otherwise you don't continue. If somebody is hurt, you can help lighten their burden, but they will have to take the next step. And it's a profound experience. I definitely will do it again. And the next time, when I did this one, I had a fixed starting date and I had a fixed ending date. My next Camino will not have an end date because it opens up. We pushed very hard for 29 days. Marco de Torino, a guy that I met at the train station in Biarritz on the way to Saint-Jean, he looked like a pilgrim, and we hit it off from there. He had a hard end date, and he pulled everybody along. He was the de facto leader of our group. But there were a couple of other people. Someone I called Saint-Jean. His name is Jean. I met him in Saint-Jean, and he's studying to be a priest. So I called him Saint-Jean. He was our spiritual leader. He would only walk 6 days a week, and on the 7th day he would rest. He would join one of the parishes and say mass with the local priest, and he would not walk on that 7th day. But he started his Camino in Paris. He left in Paris on foot, and he was fast enough to catch up with the rest of us by walking 1 day less a week. Another friend of mine had food poisoning and was out of commission for 3 days. After which he decided to walk silently every day but walk 50 kilometers. Now 50 kilometers is 31 miles every day without saying a word. We met actually when I came back from Finisterre. She just made it to Santiago. So we met up, had dinner, and actually went to mass in the cathedral together. And it felt right for her to do that. And everybody finds a way of doing it. Sometimes they don't find it on the Camino. They find it after the Camino. But as I said, it is a unique experience to slow your life down to a pedestrian pace. I personally do not like the bicycle Camino pilgrims. Number one, they are dangerous because they always come from behind and you can barely hear them. And some of the descents are very, very steep, and you've been walking for 10 miles, your knees buckle already, and you don't want to have to jump out of the way for a bicycle rider. But much more importantly, I don't believe that you can take in the Camino if you are on a bicycle. It's too fast. You start to notice things. One thing that I noticed is that on the third day, I started walking differently. The first 2 days, I was laboring. I was fighting against my backpack. I was hunched over, trying to carry the load. On the third day, I started to walk upright, and I started to breathe differently. You also, because we did this in July and August, we didn't have a single day of rain, which is unusual for the areas that you walk through. The first 2 weeks, it's an unending trek through wheat fields or vineyards. You are in Navarra and in the Rioja regions of Spain. It's the same thing. I claimed that there was a combine following us for the first week because we saw a combine every day harvesting the wheat fields. And actually on the second part, Daniel and I literally ran into a combine that was using a footpath in between fields, and we had to jump into a ditch so that the combine could pass. There was no other way. There was a ditch on one side and a ditch on the other side, and the rest was hedges. So it was just enough for the combine passing literally overhead. So something that you start appreciating is color, flowers, music. Because when you walk during the day, all you hear is your footsteps and your occasional critter. You say buen camino to the other pilgrims. But unless you're walking with someone and you talk, it's very, very quiet. So that when you get to an albergue and you hear music, or I ended up in a tiki bar taking a rest stop, and the guy is playing jazz music. And he asked me what music I wanted to hear. And I said, you already got it. So I spent some extra time just listening to the music there. And you notice and appreciate things like that. Just as you appreciate having a conversation with someone at the end of the day after you spent 8 hours listening to your footsteps.
So for you, Roland, was the physical exertion harder or the mental pushing?
To be honest, I never had a doubt that I would be able to do the physical part. I had prepared mentally for the physical part, having run a number of marathons. I had an idea of what endurance would feel like. And my last couple of marathons were very, very painful. So I have stopped running. And mentally, the three different segments that I walked were very, very different. The first part of the Camino, I had no idea what I was getting into. And it was all so new that it was just overwhelming. And I was glad when the day was over, and it then formed a rhythm. My second stage that I walked with the same guy was totally different. We would start out at 6 o'clock in the morning. And for the first half of our day, we would talk. To be honest, I would do most of the talking. But he wanted to know all kinds of things, and we talked about all kinds of things, and he kept asking questions, so I kept talking. And then the second half of the day, because he was much younger and much fitter than I was, he would walk ahead, and we meet up in the albergue that we had picked for the end of that day. But because we were together every single day, by the end, when I then walked the additional 2 days to the end of the world, for me were mind-opening. It had a totally different feeling. I was lucky enough. I had only 2 minor blisters, and one of them I actually got the day before I started my Camino in Paris, because I went through Paris. And I walked around Paris, and I had no idea how sandy the parks in Paris were. So I got some sand into my shoes, and I had a little blister. But that was it for me. So from a purely physical point of view, I was lucky. There were others that suffered badly. But for me, the physical part was not the difficult part. Don't get me wrong. It hurts. You have no idea how much your feet can hurt. But you have also no idea of what a shower and a 1-hour siesta does to get your strength back. You also become an expert in geology. Because I swear to you, I know every shape a piece of rock can take, because you felt it. And also, truth be told, you start talking to the rocks, and not all of it is available for family consumption. Because you walk, and it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it's about 100 degrees out there, you've been walking all day, and there is this tiny little piece of rock that has just one really sharp point, and that hit you right where it hurts. So you swear out loud. Actually, on the third day, I swore the loudest. It's Puente la Reina. It was a very, very long stretch. The last part, you had to walk on the side of a road, and it was a winding road. And you knew you only had a couple of more kilometers to go, but you had no sense of how long a couple of kilometers is. You haven't developed that yet. At the end of the Camino, you knew exactly how long you would need. Third day, I had absolutely no idea. So every time I go around a bend and I think I can see the town I want to go to, it's just another road that leads to another bend. And by the 5th bend or so, I walked around the bend, and I think they could hear me a couple of miles in both directions of what I let out, swearing at that piece of road. But at the end, you get used to it, and you understand distances much better. that day when we couldn't find a place to stay at, that was a tough day. It was our longest. It was our longest stage, and it was unplanned. We had paced it out so we would have 2 easy days to make it to Santiago, and instead it was one brutal day. And 3 miles before Santiago, if you can actually, if you know where to stand, you can actually see the top of the cathedral from that. Monte de Gozo is the Hill of Light. You can see Santiago from there. It's only 3 miles, but there was absolutely no way that we would have made it that day.
Thank you, Roland.
What is the symbol of the pilgrims?
Here on my socks, you see the symbol, and you also see here a scallop shell. The scallop shell is the symbol for the Camino, and it goes back to one of the many, many myths about the Santiago, about the Camino, and about St. James. There are 2 most popular myths. One is about Santiago himself, that his bones were transported to Galicia, and then the boat turned over before they made landfall, and so they were praying, and as they were praying, the body of Santiago rose from the sea covered in seashells. That's one telling of the story. Another telling of the story involves a newlywed couple that capsized, and when they prayed to Santiago, they miraculously were lifted from the waters unhurt and were covered in seashells. But like, yep.
Isn't it also true that the early pilgrims before they used to bring them back from Spain as proof that they'd actually finished the El Camino? Because that's where the sea, the Spanish Sea has all the shells. They bring them back.
Correct.
They'd finish the trek.
Yes. And what you will find is there are many, many stories about the Camino, the veracity of which is highly questionable. Something that I didn't show, but maybe I can find it fast enough, but I have to go to the German version of my talk. It's about the myths of the Camino, and the Santiago is full of myths. One of the things is Santiago Matamoros. Santiago Matamoros is the patron saint of Spain, and it has its mythical origins in the Battle of Clavijo in 844, when Ramiro I fought the emir of Cordoba, Abd al-Rahman II, and the Spanish were losing, so they prayed to Santiago for deliverance, and miraculously Santiago appeared on a white horse and single-handedly slew 5,000 Moors by himself. There are pictures of Santiago Matamoros throughout the Camino. This one here is very famous in Logroño, and I took this picture and I found it ironic that the mother with her daughter in a head covering was walking by. The history of the Moors and the Spanish history cannot be separated. And the interesting part of Santiago Matamoros is that the Battle of Clavijo certainly did not take place in 844. The story was told 300 years later by a historian who probably made up the entire story and put it in 844 because that's the anniversary, the 800th anniversary of the death of Santiago. But the battle probably never ever took place, but it was used by the fascists in Spain to make St. James the patron saint of Spain, and he remains the patron saint of Spain to this day. So every myth and every story you hear about the Camino, you have to take with a grain of salt, and you have to understand the history of the Camino. And as I said, every day you walk through at least 1,000 years of history. Most of the Camino route is actually an old Roman trading route that is 2,000 years old. So this area has been populated by different peoples all the time. And my patron saint, Roland of Bretagne, he was a knight in the armies of Charlemagne. For me, I'm Franconian. I come from Franconia. So Charlemagne, this is all my history. So I went to the fountain of Roland where he was slain when he was commanding the rear guard of the troops of Charlemagne retreating from Spain back into France. And it's said that Roland fought bravely and held off the Moors from attacking the army of Charlemagne. Well, probably not. The people he was fighting that particular day, and the battle did take place in 788, were Basques. And the Basques were pissed off because Charlemagne had overthrown their government and imposed his rule on them. So when they got a chance to do a guerrilla attack on the rear guard, they took their chance and slew Roland, the brave knight, whose song, the Song of Roland, is the medieval foundation story for France. So it ties European history together. And I had a really good tour guide, because my tour guide not only gave the distances and the best albergues to stay at, for every single town, it gave historical context, which is just amazing if you walk through this, thinking back how life was there 1,000 years ago. And what is important in this context is many of the towns that you walk through only exist because of the Camino. They would not exist today if it weren't for the Camino. Now, in the 70s, the Camino almost came to a standstill. There are a couple of years in the 70s where there were only a couple of dozen pilgrims that went all the way to get a Compostela. And there are records going back 1,000 years. So it almost died out until a local priest resurrected it. When I did it, 327,000 people got a Compostela that year. And the year after that, it was 20,000 people more. And then COVID hit. So I have no idea. I know a couple of people that actually went early last year and then everything shut down. And my guess is it will survive.
I'm sure.
There's another, if we have time, there's another story about, you've heard about St. Anthony's fire, a disease that was endemic in the Middle Ages. There's a famous abbey. Now it is a small albergue run by hippies. But back in the day, it was a very, very prosperous abbey, San Anton. And it was famous because a lot of people were very, very generous and donated to the abbey for the miraculous cure of St. Anthony's fire, which is a fungal infection. What the people didn't know at the time, they went on the Camino praying to find relief for this infection. And the infection can be so severe that your extremities become gangrenous and have to be amputated. The local abbey not only became rich from donation of people who got cured, they also got rich of people that took advantage of their surgical expertise, amputating their limbs. But what the pilgrims didn't know is the fungal infection is, it's called ergotism. It is a fungus that grows on rye, and you consume it with rye bread. Once you get to San Anton, you have now walked, well, that's about 250 miles through wheat fields. And you ate wheat bread every day instead of rye bread, and your inflammation would go down and you would be miraculously cured. Neither the pilgrims nor the monks in the abbey knew that. But that is one of the miracles that happened on the Camino that were very miraculous to the people that experienced it.
Roland, I got a tie to Santiago de Compostela. My hometown is called Muy Noble y Muy Leal Ciudad de Santiago de los Caballeros de Guatemala.
Ah, yes.
And that came from there, from Santiago de Compostela. That was baptized by one of the kings from Spain in the 1776.
Yep. It has been a draw for pilgrims from all over the world. Today, most people that walk the Camino do it for the experience. And it's more spiritual than religious. It is very secular in parts. But the history of the Camino is rich of religious pilgrims who did it because they needed to. Some were paid to actually do it for someone else. But it is an unbroken line of 1,000 years now that people have made this pilgrimage. And you can still find meaning on the Camino. On the second day, I had one of those Camino moments. The first day, if you recall this, so I had originally planned to do this Camino with a friend of mine who is a number of years older than I am. And we had planned it out, we had mapped it out, we had started to train for it. and it became apparent that he would not be able for doing it. And after we hiked up this first steep incline to Horizon, which is where this picture was taken, I sent him a note, WhatsApp message with this picture, and I said, Barry, I know exactly where we would have buried you, because you would have died that first day up this mountain. He said, yeah, you're right, I probably wouldn't have made it. It was a joke. On the second day, I'm walking by myself. I'm walking on a path along a little river, and it has a total canopy. It's totally covered. And I come to a spot where there is a stone memorial and an inscription of someone from Brazil who had died on that very spot. And then it really hit me. People die on the Camino every year. During the month that we were on the Camino, 2 people died. One died on the Camino that we were on, and one died on the Camino Real. Actually, a relatively young guy in good shape, but he died of heat exhaustion. It was 120 degrees heat that particular day, and he did not heed the warning of you need to listen to your body, you need to understand your body. It happens every day. But there are also people on the Camino that walk it because they've just recovered from cancer treatment and they walk it. It's different for every single person that experiences it.
Yeah, I can imagine that's got to be incredibly life-changing. Sorry about the echo. I don't know what that's all about. Roland, would you mind stop sharing your screen? It fixes the echo. There, is that better? There we go. Well, I thank you very much, Roland. That presentation was incredibly informative, and now I want to go live in Spain again. We have people dropping out because we're getting a little late here. We have a board meeting shortly that we need to get to. So I wanted to say thank you on behalf of our entire club.
Thank you all. Thanks for the opportunity to share my experience.
And let's see, who can we pick on tonight to lead us in the 4-way test? Blair Campbell. Well, he's just going to ignore me. All right, I will lead us in the 4-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First,
is it true?
Second,
is it fair to all concerned?
Third, will it build
goodwill and better friendships?
Fourth, will it be
to all concerned?
And fifth,
will it be fun?
Thank you so much, Roland.
Thank
you, everybody.
Thank you guys very much.
Have a good night.
Presentation.